So you may have seen this year that we've done a series of example questions for the UCAT and me walking you through exactly how to answer them and get the speed and accuracy that you need to score as high as possible. Here what I'm doing is training you to get into the mindset of exactly what you should do and the knee-jerk reaction when you see a question and what technique or how to think about it to get that speed and accuracy up. Today we're going to do the SJT to complete the series. If you want to see all of the other sections where I do some walkthrough questions, you can check out the playlist here. Otherwise, let's dive right in with some questions and I'll see you at the end where we're going to show you some free resources for how you can maximize your score. Okay, so first question, as always, I'll give you a minute to read the scenario and answer the first question, and then 30 seconds for each subsequent question, and then you'll see me back here and we'll go through the answers and I'll tell you about my thinking of how you should approach these to answer them the best way possible. Okay, enjoy. Okay, welcome back and well done for having a go. So let's go through the answers. So let's just read the scenario. I know you've read this obviously, but let's just go through it and I'll point out the important bits. So an elderly patient with an inoperable illness has been informed by Dr. Nicholson that the medical team has determined that no further treatment is available for his condition. However, the patient is convinced that further treatment would be beneficial. He has been reading about further treatment on the internet and believes this could be the right course of action for him at this time. He tells Dr. Nicholson he would like to be given further treatment for the illness despite the medical team's decision. How important to take into account are the following considerations for Dr. Nicholson when deciding how to respond to this situation. So the themes that come up in this are patient autonomy, so the patients have the right to have a say over their care. Also, they're also entitled to have a second opinion. So these are just things that we need to bear in mind that are the patient's rights. Also, then we're looking at the type of question, and it's the important type of questions. So just to remind ourselves, it depends on the situation, and the important is harder to define than the appropriateness ones. But for very important, I would say it's either something that must do or is a really big deal, really matters, is very significant, or is very pertinent to the situation. Then important is should do, or is still a deal but not the biggest deal possible. Of minor importance is that in the circumstance you could do it maybe, or there's no consequence if you don't take that action, but it's not relevant. Or again, let's go to the not important at all, which is shouldn't do, actively shouldn't do, or is really not a big deal, completely irrelevant. And then the of minor importance is that kind of in between. It's not a big deal, but it's not like the most irrelevant thing ever. There's probably a redeeming factor in it. So let's have a look at the situation. So, okay, we've got a patient who's obviously unwell and has been told that there's no more treatment that can be offered, and they want to keep fighting. So how important to take into account are the following considerations, Dr. Nicholson, when deciding how to respond to the situation, right? So importance in responding to the situation. So again, a really important thing, it doesn't matter how bad the situation is, or how, let's say it's like someone's made a mistake, it doesn't matter how wrong the initial action is, it's given the circumstance, what is the best thing that person can do, or what is the most important thing in that circumstance. So how important is the patient's right to be involved with decisions regarding this treatment and further care? So autonomy is one of the 4 pillars of ethics, and it's just one of the fundamental foundational things that are important with the patient. So I'm going to say a very important thing, because it's probably one of the most important factors to consider. And lo and behold, yeah, that's right. Patient with mental capacity should always be involved in decisions regarding their treatment and further care. This is a very important consideration. Yeah, absolutely, very important. That the medical team have made their decision based on their combined expertise. Now, obviously, so the way to tackle these sorts of questions is firstly go, is it top half or is it bottom half? And then once it's within the top or bottom half, you need to decide, split the hairs. So I would say this is top half. It is important. It's in the top half of importance that the medical team have made, that they've got together and they talked about it. But it is ultimately an opinion, and it's not black and white. And patients are allowed to ask for a second opinion, and other doctors might disagree. So it is important they've obviously put some time into it. But I don't think it's very important because, like I say, it's almost like the other one was the utmost importance. This one is important. Obviously, it's significant. A lot of doctors and other allied healthcare professionals think this, but also they aren't necessarily always 100% right. So I'm going to say B. Let's check out the answer. Okay, good. So although the medical team have made a decision, it may be that the situation can be reassessed in light of the patient's research. Yeah, exactly. So they might not know all the information, have all of the cards. And yeah, it's important to consider that there might be something to reconsider. Next, maintaining a positive outlook for the patient. So again, maintaining hope for patients is really important. And especially when they may have a legitimate reason for why there is something that can be done. They might have found something that this clinician might not have thought about, right? So maintaining a positive outlook is again in the top half. It is important. Again, it's not the utmost thing that we need to think about. We need to maintain that, the 4 pillars are the key things. So, beneficence, non-maleficence. So doing right by the patient, not doing harm to the patient, autonomy, and justice, right? So the patient's right. So those are the real kind of staples. Now, keeping them in a good mind frame is up there. It's not the most important thing. So I'm going to put important. I'm fairly confident that's going to be right. Okay, yeah. Positive attitude is important for enhancing quality of life. It is important that Dr. Nicholson be positive, at least about making further inquiries. The other side of it is we don't want to give false hope as well. It's not a very good explanation here for why it's not very important, but I think I explained that quite well myself, if I say so myself. Okay, so final one, that the patient may not fully understand the complexities of the treatment. So capacity is a really important part, and it's the ability of the patient to basically to understand what it is they are involved in, to understand the care, the treatment, the test, whatever it is for that situation. It's their ability to understand. Now, capacity is relative to the thing. So some things might be really complicated, and maybe a patient with learning difficulties, for example, they may understand having their blood taken or having their blood pressure taken, so they consent to that, but they might not understand a really complex situation. So the fact that he understands what the treatment involves and that he's fully informed to make a capacitous decision or make a fully informed decision is very, very important. So I would put that A. Yeah, so we've had all in the top half of this. Okay, yeah, I mean, no surprise there that that's right. Although the patient is convinced of the benefits of further treatment, he may well have misunderstood what this might entail. This is a very important consideration which Dr. Nicholson should investigate further before deciding on a course of action. Yeah, super, super important. Okay, cool. So that's those 4 done. Let's have another go at another one. Maybe let's go a little bit more complicated. This is a nice, easy one to start. Okay, next one. This time we're looking at the appropriateness type questions. So as always, 1 minute to read the scenario and attempt the first question, then 30 seconds for each subsequent question, and I'll have me back to go through the answers. Okay, enjoy, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, well then, so let's just talk through the scenario and look at the pertinent points here. So Kieran, a medical student, is supporting on the GP surgery reception desk when he is approached by a member of the local authority, Amalia, who is investigating the absence of a child from school. Amalia asks Kieran if the child has recently attended the GP surgery. Amalia insists on the information being shared as she explains that the investigation involves a complex family situation. Kieran is aware that under the surgery's confidentiality policy, unless there is a court order or the parent or guardian of the child consents, cannot reveal confidential information. How appropriate are each of the following responses by Kieran in this situation? Assume that each of the following responses would be said politely. Okay, so it's good to understand that last bit. let's just look at what the situation is here. So obviously we're talking about confidentiality. Now, confidentiality must be protected at all times. The rules around confidentiality are that you can only share the information with the patient's consent, or in a child's case, the parental consent. And even when sharing it amongst healthcare professionals, the idea is that you should only share it with people who need to know the information, right? Now, there are some exceptions where somebody is potentially in physical danger, or they could be at harm or at risk, or the police request it for an investigation, that can be broken. But in this case, it cannot. And they actually specifically say that it cannot. So let's just briefly remind ourselves what we're talking about when it comes to the appropriateness. So if it's a very appropriate thing to do, it's a very positive action being taken in the context of the scenario. An appropriate but not ideal is that it's not the best option, but it's deemed okay given the context. And then let's look at a very inappropriate, because that helps us define inappropriate but not ideal. So a very inappropriate thing to do is that it should not be done and will likely lead to a negative consequence and a worsening of the scenario. And finally, the inappropriate but not awful is that it is not an ideal action to take, but it's also not catastrophic given the scenario. So as always, you take the proposed action in the context of the scenario. So it's not how bad the scenario is, it's how good or bad the proposed action is given the context, right? And as always, the best way to do this is to decide when you see that proposed action, is it top half or bottom half? Is it generally good? Is it generally bad? And then is it a really, really good thing, or is it just good but maybe could be better? Or is it if it's bad, is it a really, really bad thing but not as terrible as it could be? Okay? Or there are some redeeming features, as we said. So I cannot share that information without consent from he's saying I cannot share that information without consent from a parent or guardian. Remember, he said it politely. So basically he's just telling them that he cannot do it. He's literally not allowed. And I would say that is definitely a good thing, and that is what you should do, really. So I would say that is a very appropriate thing to say. Okay, let's see what it says. So we've got that correct. This is a very appropriate thing to say, as it is consistent with the GDPR and the surgery's confidentiality policy, which should stipulate that the duties of medical professionals include protecting patients' personal information through improper disclosure. In this answer, he clearly communicates the reason why the request cannot be granted and what actions are required as a solution to resolve the issue. So there we go. Yeah, pretty straightforward. It's a good answer. The next thing is, he says, I understand that this is a sensitive situation, but I am unable to share information at this point. Now, again, the be-all and end-all is that he doesn't suggest that he can give the information, or he doesn't give the information. That would be a bad thing to do. But generally, he's said that he's unable to share the information at this point. Right. Now, so it's generally a good thing. It's generally going to be one of these two. But I would say it could be better, because he could explain why. Like, if you said to somebody, look, I can't, it's illegal, in a politer way, then that would be perfect. Like the answer before was perfect in that sense. But this one, I think just saying I'm unable to share at this point, firstly, it alludes that you might be able to at another point, which might be true, but it's very vague and unclear. So I would give appropriate but not ideal. I imagine that's going to be correct, yeah. So this is an appropriate but not ideal thing to say, because although it correctly reflects the inability to disclose or share information, it does not provide a rationale. This is what I'm saying. The reason is important as well, because people want, if you got that answer, you'd say like, well, why? You'd think that they're just being difficult. So if you preempt that with a nice reason, then people will be a lot more understanding, let's say. So doesn't provide a rationale or explain the circumstances in which the request to disclose information may be granted as per the surgery's confidentiality policy and GDPR. Okay, cool. So providing more information might have made that a good answer. Okay, so let's look next. I could lose my placement if I share that information. So I would say that this, again, is it generally positive or generally negative? I think it's not very professional. So generally it's negative. So we're putting it in these two, in the category of these two. But remember, a very inappropriate thing to say is that it would actively make the situation worse. Actively making the situation worse would be giving the information to the patients and breaking their confidentiality. So what I would say is that it's not as bad as it could be. It's not a great answer, but it's also not the worst. Okay, so C. By the way, if you've watched any other of these videos in the series, you will see that I do get a few of these wrong, but so far, I think they've been pretty straightforward. I hope that you found the same, or at least having me explain them, you can see that. So far, I seem to be doing quite well. So correct answer is C. This is inappropriate, but not awful, because although it could be considered as reflecting the seriousness of the potential consequences of breaching patient confidentiality, it does not prioritize the safeguarding of the patient's right over the personal interests of the medical student. It is important that medical professionals must always consider the best interest of the patient over their own, which is fair enough. I didn't actually give that as my rationale. So what they're saying is that the response that Kieran's saying is, I'm only not giving it you because I can get in trouble. And that's not really the right attitude. It's more, I shouldn't do it because it's wrong, rather than I shouldn't do it because I'm going to get bollocked for it. Last one. So in response to this situation, what if Kieran says, I could ask someone more senior how I might be able to get that information? So I would say this is negative. This is bad because he's insinuating that he can get the information. And actually, so let's say he does do that, and then he goes away and speaks to a senior, and the senior goes, no, you can't give them the information. They will be very annoyed but they'll be like, but you told me you could, or you insinuated that you could. So he's not said you can't have that information. So I would say that this is actually, like I say, it's all about a very inappropriate thing to do, is should not be done, and will likely lead to a negative consequence or worse in the situation. And I think that will do this. So I'm going to put this as a very inappropriate thing to do. And this is quite an interesting question, because if you've noticed, it's gone from the best answer to the second best to the third to the worst. The questions can be quite easy sometimes when you get this sort of thing, because it kind of almost like when you compare them, you can see, well, that's really good, that's terrible, that, or in this case, that's really good, that's good but not the best, that's bad but not the worst, and this one is terrible. Yeah, just interesting to see with this. So let's round this off. This is a very inappropriate thing to say, because this response does not indicate to the person making the request that compliance with the request would breach patient confidentiality as per the surgery confidentiality laws and GDPR, blah, blah, blah. So he's not told them, like, no, that's wrong, I can't do that. The response also does not reflect that the policies on patient confidentiality and GDPR apply to all staff at the surgery, regardless of grade of seniority. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's just a bad answer. Cool, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, so a minute to read and then 30 seconds for each subsequent question, and you have 5 to go through and enjoy. So see you on the other side. Okay, so let's talk through this and go to pick out the pertinent points. So Sapphire has been asked to do a group presentation on sleep disorders as part of her course. In a meeting earlier in the week, she and her partner Dominic agreed that they would evenly distribute the work and would each present the sections that they wrote. The presentation is an hour and Sapphire and Dominic are practicing. Presentation is in an hour and they're practicing when Dominic begins to panic and tell Sapphire that he does not think he can present his section and is too nervous. He asks Sapphire to present his sections for him. How important is it to take into account the following considerations for Sapphire when deciding how to respond to this situation? So, what do we have at play here? So, we have the well-being of a colleague. We have, I guess, the importance of, we don't know the context here, so how really important it is that the audience know this. A few things at play here. Now, this is one of the ones that can trip people up, and probably, I've got a good record so far in this particular set, but this is probably one where I might struggle. So let's see. So, how important to take into account are the following considerations when deciding how to respond to this situation? So, her own confidence in presenting Dominic's slides. Now, you could argue this both ways, and this is where I hate SJT, and I think it's a bit silly, really, is that you could argue, well, Dominic's not feeling great, and he either needs reassurance or need to make sure that he's okay. But at the same time, we've got an audience that may really need to know this information. So, what's the most important thing? And remember that you get points for how far off the right answer you are. Remember that. So obviously the maximum points are getting it bang on, but equally, if you're close but no cigar, you still get something. So let's have a go at this one. So let's see. So I'm going to assume that it's not the most important thing because we should be thinking about Dominic's well-being. But at the same time, we need to be able to deliver this talk. So I'm going to put it as important because I don't think it's the most important thing, but equally matters to be able to think of plan B to get the talk done. Oh, okay. It's the most important thing. Right. Okay. Let's see what they say. This is very important. Medical and dental professionals do not operate outside the scope of their practice and competence. In view of the short notice and that Dominic's reluctant to present is due to being nervous rather than a significant health issue, a bit undermining of someone's anxiety there. It is very important that Sapphire considers her ability and confidence in terms of supporting her group to deliver the best presentation possible. So basically, okay, so this is where, sometimes it's hard to decide what the context is. They are probably saying how important that she doesn't just bullshit her way through the presentation, despite, with not really knowing that bit. How important is it that she doesn't blag it, basically? So framing it that way, yes, of course, that's important, but doesn't really make it clear. He asks Sapphire to present the sections for him. Okay, fine. Let's see. So, how important is Dominic's well-being in the context of this situation? So, how important is Dominic's well-being important in the context of this situation? So I would say it's, again, important, right? If he's not doing it because he's unwell, it does change it slightly. Now, again, I'm going to put it as important. I'm kind of slightly influenced by the last question or the last answer, where they've almost kind of poo-pooed the fact that he's just nervous, and almost ignored the fact that you could maybe bring him around, like make it like calm him down and get him able to present. So I'm going to put important here. Let's see what's said. Okay, fine. I wasn't confident that was going to be right. This is important. Medical and dental professionals can only work within their mental and physical capabilities. Therefore, Dominic's well-being is an important consideration in this scenario, particularly in terms of ensuring that a compassionate and supportive environment conducive to health and well-being is being provided by the institution, including Dominic's colleagues and peers. It is also important to support Dominic to access additional support he may need to address this issue. Okay, so yeah, we're not just completely disregarding him. Good. Okay, whether Dominic would do the same for her in this situation, I would say that is completely irrelevant, right? What does it matter whether he would, like, you should act morally and rightly regardless of what people say or regardless of what other people would do. So her likelihood of doing it for him shouldn't be influenced by his likelihood of doing it for her. So I would say that is completely irrelevant. For me, it's in this ball. Why is it not important at all? Is it like a shouldn't do, absolutely doesn't matter? I would say so. I would say it absolutely doesn't matter. Let's see. D. Okay, perfect. This is not important at all. Acting in the best interests of others, patients, colleagues, the general public, etc., over personal interests or gain are part of the standards and principles, good practice for medical and dental professionals. Therefore, whether Dominic would do the same for her should not be an important consideration for Sapphire in this situation. Here we go. Good. They had agreed to present each of their own sections of the presentation. Again, ultimately, what is the goal here? The goal is to make sure that Dominic's well or able, and also that the presentation clearly needs to be done, and it's important to this grad really, the show must go on. This grad really needs to know this information, otherwise the institution will crumble. But I'd say the fact that they agreed to do their own presentation, so it's probably of minor importance, I would say, because ultimately they both planned and had every good intention of doing it, and the fact that he's nervous, he couldn't help that, right? So it's not like, I can just imagine the situation where poor Dominic's going, oh, I'm too nervous to do this, and Sapphire going, well, we said that we'd do our own thing, and almost like being like, well, you said you'd do it. That doesn't help or isn't really very relevant. So I'd say it's of minor importance, because it's not completely irrelevant, but also at the same time, it's not helpful. You could argue that it's not important at all because this is the kind of shouldn't do, make it worse sort of thing. And you could argue that actually, if you come at somebody with like, well, you said you'd do it, and they're like, well, I'm sorry. Imagine if this was somebody who had the flu and they couldn't present. You would never say, well, we'd agreed to do this. So the fact that they're nervous and have anxiety around it shouldn't be any different. So yeah, I'd probably put it in between these two actually, but let's see. Okay, fine. Let's see why it's not important at all. This is of minor importance. It is important to ensure that the members of the team understand their roles and responsibilities, including decisions and what actions have and have not been delegated to them. However, there is an acknowledgement that circumstances change, and the ability to adapt to change also considered as an important aspect of good practice across professional groups. Therefore, given the previous agreement, the division of work should be of minor importance in this scenario. So I don't like these explanations all that well, because they don't really explain that well why is it not important at all. I mean, they try to. If you guys have seen my UCAT course, my online course, loads and loads of questions of these where I explain exactly why. And I think that's really important to understand. Sometimes the UCAT questions aren't very satisfying, I think. So yeah, if you want to check that out, there's the link in the description for, it's a really effective course. And like you've heard me say before, I always get emails of people who have done really well in the UCAT and they attribute it to that course. So worth checking out. Anyway, let's move on. Whether Dominic is required to present in order to be graded, completely irrelevant. In this scenario, why would the fact that he's being graded make a difference? He needs to give the presentation. It's a professional thing to have to present to colleagues and to do a good job for their sake and for helping each other. And he's feeling nervous, so the fact that they're being graded, I would say to present in order to be graded, maybe it's of minor importance because the scenario is that he's asking her to do it for him. So maybe if she kind of convinces him, like, look, if you can kind of almost like get him to calm down to do it, then maybe that's a good thing to get the grade that he needs. But I think ultimately, if you can't present, you can't present. So I'd say it's of minor importance. Oh, it's very important. See, this is where you can get like things way wrong. And okay, this is very important. Important medical and dental professionals take part in activities that maintain, update, or develop their knowledge and skills. For trainees, these activities may include formative and summative assessments, such as verbal representations to ascertain ability as well as develop important skills such as communication skills. But it's not asking whether graded work is important. It is therefore very important that Sapphire considers whether Dominic is required to present in order to be graded when deciding how to respond to the situation. As in, what are they saying? So if he does, and if he's going to not pass, they should just ignore how he's feeling and just power through it. Seems very insensitive, really, in this what would Jesus do type scenario. So I think that sounds really weird. And like I say, the fact that it's graded, all of a sudden, all of the niceties and ethical or maybe kind of soft considerations just go out the window, do they? Okay, fine. Like I say, SJT is not my favorite thing in the world. And that's us done. Okay, in a moment, I'm going to show you where you can get some great free resources, and if you need some help as well, where to look. So I hope you found that useful. If you want some free resources, as always, go to the FutureDoc website and check out the free resources page where you can download your free UCAT guide alongside many other bits for all of the other parts of the medical and dental school application. Also, if you want to check out the rest of the UCAT walkthrough playlist, you can do so here. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see you in one of those videos.